Hi guys, and welcome to episode 5 of Behind the Frame. I hope you've enjoyed the series so far, and again, please, if you have any questions or something that you would like me to feature specifically moving forward, drop me an email. All the details are at the end of this, and if you're not following me on Instagram or on Facebook already, then just drop me an email. Today I thought I'd do a fairly short but quite useful session looking at an image of a beautiful female leopard which was photographed in the Timbavati Game Reserve last year. This time of year, January, February, March, it's the peak of the rainfall season, good rains around, all the grass and vegetation is very green. This female she was just finishing off a young impala lamb, also time when animals give birth, and so easy pickings for things like leopards. Technical specs. This was shot at on a 800 mils here. So it was the 400 mil f2.8 lens from Canon with a 2x converter. So 800 mils, 1/640th of a second, slightly slower than 1/over shutter speed, but I was resting on a beanbag. At ISO 500 and 6.3. So obviously at 800 mils, your focal length is quite exaggerated, and you can see even here at 6.3, it's a very shallow depth of field. You can notice how the jaw here is nice and sharp, and then it drops off just to the shoulder there. So had I just shot this at the standard 5.6, bearing in mind that 2.8 changes to 5.6 when you throw on a converter, we would not have had that kind of depth to the scene. So that's where the aperture value comes from on there. 5.6 would have been just too shallow. So 6.3 just giving us a little bit of extra. I also would have underexposed this image quite a bit, I think by one full stop, based on the amount of green vegetation here. Now remember that the camera wants to bring things to gray or 18% gray. Anything that is darker than that, the camera wants to try and lift. Anything that's brighter, it wants to bring it back down. So by underexposing, I'm keeping a lot of these greens, which are a lot darker than gray, dark. And that just adds to the mood of this image. The fact that this female is looking up into the sky, fantastic. Often when animals are on kills, they've got a little bit of meat around. There's vultures or birds harassing predators. They will quickly take a little glance up to the top of the sky, and that's when you get the sky and the light reflecting in the eyes. No need to go in there with localized adjustments and try and make it happen. The magic happens in the field. So be aware of that the next time you're at a sighting with predators on a kill or at a leopard at the base of a tree. In terms of the editing and processing, I'm not going to go into too much detail, just a standard process, looking at the basics, the tone curve, the sharpening, a subtle vignette, before and after. So you can see we've taken the image, a great image to start off with, and just kind of dialed it up and polished it a little bit. What I did want to spend a bit of time on was the tint slider. Now, I'm not too sure how many of you are familiar with this or have ever used it, but this is a great example. This refers to the tint of light that is falling on the subject. So if you can picture a lion that's standing on bare red earth and the light is falling and reflecting off of that red earth, it's safe to assume that the lion itself is going to have a bit of a tint to it. And in this kind of situation where there's a lot of greenery around, you can see that the whole image has a bit of a tint across it, a green kind of coloration to it. And we were chatting with Mike and Al in the office a little earlier on, and Mike was saying how he's noticed it a lot in shady environments. And it makes perfect sense because the light is not coming from a controlled source. It's no longer from the sun. It's rather coming from the vegetation, reflecting off of the vegetation or the soil around that subject that's sitting in deep shade. So not only do you have a color temperature issue, but you've got a tint issue. So if you're not quite sure with what I mean, if you have a look at this tint slider, if we go all the way up, it changes the whole tint and overtone to this image. So we can go either which way. And this is to compensate for exactly this kind of light around a subject and falling onto them. So if we just take this up to a value of about 15 or so. So what I'm looking at here is just the overall color and tone of the image. I'm going to go onto the left-hand side here, and in the history, I'm going to take it back a step. And I want you guys to just have a look here. So let's zoom in. Look at the kind of overall color tones here. So this is what it was beforehand at a value of 5. Watch what happens when we take it up. We take it up just below 20. So we undo that tint, have a look at the image, and then we apply it again. Can you see how the coloration, originally you may not even picked it up, so it's such a subtle element in a frame, but it does make a big difference. Just kind of correcting that a little bit. Why has it gone to 48? That's not correct. You can see there it's overdone. So let's tame that back a little bit, and we bring it into, I think it was just before 20. Looking at the colors there, that's where we want to be. Originally, again, just to show you once more, that's what it came out at, which looked good initially, but when you see that there's a bit of a green tint across and you compensate for that, we're able to just balance those colors a little bit. So it really is just a subtle adjustment to the image. So when should you be aware of these things? Well, when you don't have direct light, as we've discussed earlier, when you have a lot of ambient light being reflected off of a monochromatic kind of environment, so dense green vegetation in the summer months, or bright red earth which is reflecting light. So sometimes in the Kalahari, for those of you who've been there, you'll see that the light becomes very orange, and that's because of the light that's reflected off of those dunes if it's not a direct light. So something to keep in mind when you are editing your images, and making sure that you're doing as much as possible to bring it back and just really present your viewer with a very polished, clean final image. I hope you guys have enjoyed episode 5 of Behind the Frame. Short and sweet. I'll be back next week with another image. Looking forward to it. Cheers.